Wonderful. Thank you. Good morning to everybody across America and to all those folks that are listening in from international places. Then welcome to you for wherever you are in this world. My name is Terry Chiplin. For those of you that don't know me, I'm the event director for the US Trail Running Conference and also for this masterclass webinar series. So welcome to everybody out there. Well, I'd like to start off with a brief introduction for our presenting sponsor, which is Marathon Printing, for both the conference and this webinar series. So for those of you that don't know, Marathon Printing is a family-owned company, and they specialize in producing custom printed items for endurance sports. And race bibs are probably their most popular item, either custom printed or stock bibs as well. And Marathon Printing also supplies vital accessories for race directors like pins, bags, and pennant flags, as well as postcards, business cards, brochures, bumper stickers, and labels. And they have been a loyal supporter of the US Trail Running Conference since 2015 and are also an event standard partner for our partners, our friends at the American Trail Running Association. We're very grateful to Ryan Zirk and the team at Marathon Printing for their support of this webinar series. So without further ado, then I will hand over introductions to our panelists. And Jeremy, if you could kick off first, and you have something good to say about Marathon Printing, because I believe they're just down the road from you.
That's right, Terry. I am based out of the Portland area, and Marathon Printing is also based in Portland. So as we were mentioning earlier, it's less than a marathon for me to get over to them. So they've always been easy to work with, and we use them for all of our events. We just got a shipment from them last week for our event this coming weekend. So yeah,
Cool. Excellent.
Yeah, I'm Jeremy Long with I founded Daybreak Racing back in 2015, 2016 with our first event just in the Coast Range of Oregon here between Portland and the Oregon coast. And we've grown our business incrementally every year. And we this year host 11 trail running events between February and October, scattered between Oregon, Washington, and California.
Cool. Cool. Welcome. Welcome. Well, thank you so much for being here, Jeremy. Corrine, do you want to
having me
next?
Yeah, and I'll apologize. We're having a fence installed today, conveniently, and so there might be some jackhammering periodically. I've tried to find the quietest room in my house that is not like a bathroom or a closet. So, but my name is Corrine Malcolm, and I'm based in Seattle, Washington. I'm a professional runner for Adidas Terrex, but I'm also the editor-in-chief over at Freetrail. Was a columnist for a long time at iRun Far. I host the podcast Trail Society with Keely Henninger and Hillary Allen. And I am one of the voices of trail running right now as a commentator for races like Western States and historically races like UTMB. I've gotten to actually do commentary alongside Daybreak Racing this year in Freetrail at Big Alta and the Gorge Waterfalls race weekend. So you've probably heard my voice if you haven't actually seen my face, and hoping to do a lot more of that as we roll into kind of like a new dawn, a new age of race live streaming and commentary.
Cool. Corrine, a quick question. Tom, sorry to interrupt you there. The term Swiss Army knife of trail running knowledge, where did that come from? Can you give me a better background on that?
Oh, I had to write a bio recently, and I was like, you know what? I'm gonna have fun writing this bio if I have to do it. So yeah, I in my bio, I like to say that I'm a Swiss Army knife of trail running knowledge, and it's probably annoying to my husband and to some of my friends, but I have a real knack for remembering people's finishing times, historic race context, specific things that were said at a start line forever ago, etc. So I would like to think that I'm kind of an encyclopedia of stuff that happens in the trail and ultra running space.
Cool, cool. Thank you so much. And Tom, least but not last.
Yeah, I'm Tom Hooper. I'm the butter knife of trail running knowledge. I am out of New Hampshire. I am the founder of 603 Endurance. We put on 9 races a year. I'm also part of the USATF staff members for Worlds, and hopefully some other races. yeah, and I'm just basically super excited to see where this live streaming goes. I'm this when you asked me to do this, I was super excited because this is something that I think is going to be huge in the next couple of years.
Cool. Well, funnily enough, that's exactly why I brought you all together, because that's the direction the things seem to be heading. So, in a little bit of background, and I was kind of shocked to look through this. So, um, so even the Western States Lottery this year attracted 17,000 on the live stream. The Western States itself, 2021, I think, was the first year that they had a live stream there. 5,850 viewers. 2022, 148,000 viewers. 2023, 256,000 viewers. Yeah. Even Cocodona, 250, that they were averaging around 30,000 viewers per day in terms of their live stream over several days. So, you know, there's definitely, they're showing that there's a marketplace for live stream. People seem to be very interested in live streaming, and so we wanted to bring you guys together. You obviously have some experience between you. Yeah, yeah. Katie Asma, thank you. Those numbers do speak. Yes, indeed. Wanted to bring the three of you together. You've got a ton of experience in live streaming, even though it hasn't been around for that long. But so what we really wanted to do was to give race directors and event organizers out there the opportunity to hear from you three, and to then maybe get some kind of more information about how what's the best approach to live stream a race. You know, is this going to work for any size race? How should we approach this? What kind of platform should we be using? These kind of things. Who do we turn to launch the mic and get all the videos and everything lined up? So, with that in mind, we have some questions already set for our panelists here, but we do also invite you to add your questions on the Q&A here, or you can also add comments on the chat as well, and we'll work through those as we go through. So, as things pop up, then feel free to add your comments and questions there. So, Tom, could we start with you? We'll first question. So, when did you first give live streaming a race, a trail run, and how have you seen this develop to where you are now? So, what's progressed for you?
All right, so in 2022 we started. Ian Golden had held Whiteface in New York, and he does a little podcast with that software Yardstream, and he wanted to see if it was possible to live stream with it, and you know, it sounded cool. Didn't execute just because it was so new. On the ride home, we had Loon Mountain Race was going to be the next championship. It was about 2 weeks or a week and a half. So we tried to figure it out. You know, we went through the challenges. I mean, there's always challenges with software and no service, especially way up in the mountains. So that's basically, we just kind of trialed and errored it. Tried to figure out how we can modify some software to make it do what we wanted to. I guess, you know, I think there's two different sides of live streaming. When you have things like Western States, you know, Broken Arrow, that's big production. Most races I don't think can do that. You know, we're more mom and pop sort of on the side of it, where we're trying to modify stuff that's out there that we can make work. Then 2023, we had Sunapee Scramble, which went so much better, you know, and then we got Danny and MK and Finn and Brett, and we used them to you know, to do our you know, our broadcasting from where they were across the country. Well, we had it set up, the camera set up in New Hampshire, and it worked a lot better, where they could, you know, fill the air, you know, talk about certain things. But we also started to figure out how the software can work for us with how do we run banners, how do we run ads, stuff like that. And then, you know, the next place is how do we fill the space when we have, you know, a challenge? How do we fill it with some pre-recorded videos to fill the space, the void, to make it more exciting.
Cool, cool. Thank you, Tom. Corrine, do you want to? I don't know if you remember the question, or shall I read it for you again? Or are you good at
Yeah, if you can read it again, that'd be great, as we've got some minor jackhammering going on here.
Okay. When did you first give live streaming a race a trial run, and how have you seen this develop to where you are now with what you're doing with live streaming?
Yeah, so I'm obviously not on the producing end of these productions. I'm generally like either the co-commentator or the kind of host for the weekend that will have other co-commentators come in. I've also organized like the logistics around kind of data collection or like host management for the course of like a week long event like UTMB with multiple races and multiple hosts coming in and out of a studio. But I first got into the commentary booth back in 2018 at UTMB after running TDS there. They sent out, actually, they had to, via Chrissy Mole, got approval to send me a text basically, because they're like, someone in Bellingham knows this girl and we can get her on the mic for a post-race interview. And I joke that that was like their worst decision ever, because once they brought me in, it was hard to get me to leave. And since then, I went back in 2019. It's a little bit true. Went back in 2019, did the same thing, was racing that week, but also helped cover the end of OCC, like the women's podium finishers there. And then kind of pandemic happened, injury on my end happened, where I wasn't going to be able to race for more or less at least an entire season. That was the launch of, I guess in the fall was the Broken Arrow first time coverage in the October edition of that event, and then Western States as well in June of that year. And that's kind of really grown from there, both kind of making those the three main things that I've done over the course of the season: a Broken Arrow, a Western States, a UTMB week. Those were all in-person events where I was there on the ground, generally set up in a booth in proximity to the finish line. But kind of within the next year of that, UTMB decided to start streaming some of their events more remotely, where the key speaker team that was speaking in the native language, so Valderon would be the Spanish speakers would be on the ground, Transvolcania, the Spanish speakers would be on the ground, and the English commentary team, the French commentary team, et cetera, would be streaming remotely, either from a studio in France, or for Martin and I, he might be in New Zealand and I was in the US. And so I started pulling some night shifts to help cover the UTMB, the 7 races they were streaming outside of the finals in August of every year. Went over to UTCT as well to do commentary for them. So I've gotten to see a bunch of different races take on live streaming in a bunch of different ways, including working now a lot with Mountain Outpost and the Aravaipa races. And it's definitely, every organization has their own take on how to procure data, how to set up a live stream, how many moving pieces there are in the puzzle, be it professional teams that are hired to produce the back end of things, to mix the footage, to control the audio, et cetera, versus, kind of how quote unquote mom and pop it might be, where it's, very minimal infrastructure, just getting it done. I've kind of seen it from a bunch of different ends, including just like at Broken Arrow one year, I think we had like 16 screens available to us, and Dylan and I on the mic, instead of using any sort of back channel communication, to be like, we want drone number 4 right now, type of thing. And the mixers just pull it in for us. So I've seen it in a bunch of different iterations. It's definitely grown. It's definitely, I think we're moving past any live broadcast is a good live broadcast, and we're moving towards more like, these are the standards we want to hit in a live broadcast. From imagery to audio quality to the hosts that are on the mic, et cetera. But I do think that one thing that still stays true, because a lot of the races in the US in particular are streamed in really remote locations where we have really horrible data, despite using things like Starlink. Western States has been using Starlink since 2021, the first ever Western States live broadcast. We were using Starlink then, we're still using Starlink now. But we're oftentimes talking over almost still images or no images for a very long period of time. And so what we found, independent of video quality, is that audio quality is really, really important. There are people who are just listening to the YouTube feed who aren't necessarily watching it, who have it in their ears while they're running, while they're doing chores around the house, while they're driving, but aren't actually watching it. So there is this kind of dichotomy still, where like there's a radio aspect to it, where we'll see numbers drop off if the audio quality goes away versus the visual picture quality. So there, I think that does offer up I think that offers up an ability for more mom and pop races to do live broadcasting, because it's not necessarily about capturing the best ever images. It could be static images, or a static camera at the finish line and start line, and a key aid station where you have visual, but then having really good audio the entirety of the event, I think can elevate having minimal or a lack of actual good visuals. So it's been cool to watch that progress, but I think the audio thing still stands out as like a major component, and the visuals become like this bonus where like that is getting better and better, and that is very exciting.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. I got a question for you, Corrine, but I'm going to come back to you on it. So I'll note to self here. Jeremy, shall I do the question again, or you good to go?
No, I'm good. Yeah. So I would say that our first our first iteration of what we would call live streaming, one of our trail races was likely in 2021, and I think at that point, in 2021, it feels like it was probably like the, when my kids are talking about, you were born in the 1900s, in terms of the evolution of live streaming happening relatively so rapidly. In 2021, we basically took some of our events that had actual cell coverage on them, and we did basically what we would stitch together a bunch of Instagram live and record a bunch of Instagram stories, and when we had a bar of data, we would upload those in chronological order, essentially, and kind of give folks sort of this kind of chronological, I guess, coverage, of our 50Ks and 100Ks on Mount Hood in particular, since there's pretty decent cell coverage on most of the mountain. Fast forward to 2022 and our partnership with Freetrail. We resurrected the Gorge Waterfalls race here in the Columbia River Gorge. And with that event, it's essentially, we took the same platform with Instagram via Freetrail's rapid kind of rise, and they essentially rallied a bunch of friends, and they coordinated kind of a run of show in terms of how they wanted to record, and everyone had access to the Freetrail Instagram, and they did a lot of follow cams and start and finish line coverage throughout each day. And then, we were able to just kind of archive it there. And essentially, again, fast forward to 2024, and we were able, particularly through, Dylan Bowman's, kind of magnetic presence in being able to harvest enough sponsorship money to afford a contract with Mountain Outpost for them to do our live stream for the Big Alta this past February in Marin County, and for Gorge Waterfalls roughly 6 weeks later up in the Columbia River Gorge. And both were, kind of that full production live stream that Mountain Outpost has been conducting the past, what would you say, Corrine, like 1.5 to 2 years that Mountain Outpost has kind of been doing kind of the full.
Yeah, they've kind of
level.
bridged from just Aravaipa to like, we're resurrecting Mountain Outpost and really like launching that. They've brought on a lot more people, including hiring folks like Zach Marion to be kind of like the director of just the live streaming. I feel like they've been streaming for longer, obviously, with races like Javelina and some 24-hour track races, etc. Including Black Canyon in that mix as well. But yeah, I think over the last 2 years, it's really been the resurrection of Jamil just saying, like, I think we can fly a drone there, or I think we can bring a Starlink to Hard Rock. And, they've gone from, like, and a lot of that is just like Jamil not making money or, losing money, spending his own money to do things like live stream Hard Rock. Like that was just Jamil and his army of volunteers who are passionate about supporting him and his vision, essentially. And I think we've benefited the field of live streaming, which is a weird way to phrase it. The field of live streaming in trail and ultra has benefited largely from people specifically like Jamil Curry, who just have a vision and a dream and don't really care if they make money on it. And yeah, well, I think we're very fortunate that we're living in the Jamil era.
Cool.
So yeah, I guess just to wrap it up, we've two of our higher profile events, we were able to fund these contracted live streams, and the analytics alone that we've seen from those two events have been fairly staggering in terms of the viewership and familiarity of our events through having these live stream sessions, and then they're of course they're archived as well. So yeah, happy to dive into a little bit more of that later on if it comes up, if it's relevant.
Cool. Yeah, it's like a gift that keeps giving, isn't it? It's like once you have it created, then yeah, it's keeps on giving to you. Corrine, the question I had for you, I was thinking about your introduction in Europe, and so have you seen a big difference between the rate of progress really in Europe and the States in terms of live streaming for events?
I think that it's interesting. I think that they have been doing it a bit longer, and they also have better data coverage. You've got cell coverage on much of the UTMB course, for example. So the big difference between us streaming a lot of races in the US versus streaming in Europe too is that you can afford to have like follow cams in those races, just because there is cell coverage, and there's been a business kind of built around that. There is one guy that UTMB contracts with, it's his team, that is all of the e-bikes and runner cams for those events. And they tried to come over to the US last year to stream canyons. And we found out 2 weeks with Dylan and I, contracted to do the live commentary. When we found out probably 2.5 weeks before the event that they decided that there wasn't enough like cell signal for them to do it.
Wow.
And so Dylan, myself, Ryan Thrower, Addie, our boy genius, Ethan, and Chris Hollis of Hoka, like Ethan and Chris legit jumped a fence and like bartered with the local newspaper to let us run an Ethernet cable from the local newspaper office to the stage that Dylan and I were set up on. Dylan, Ryan, and I and Addie went out and we filmed that morning, and we brought that footage back to the booth and we talked about it. And then we did finish line interviews with like Chris Hollis's phone as a hotspot at the finish line. So it's just like Europe came in, was like, there's no way we can do this, versus like, I feel like there's a scrappy American mentality where we have a bar of service. We have a Starlink in this burn scar. Like we can create a stream out of this. And I think that there is a distinct difference between those two environments, which does mean too, you'll see it actually like in the live chat on a live broadcast, for example, in which the European audience that is in to watch a race like Western states, Matthew Blanchard was racing, drew an even bigger European audience than usual. And you'll see it in the chat, like when will we see the runners? Why, like, is it slow for everyone? Is everyone stream glitching, or is it just my personal computer? And it's just like there's an expectation with European races that you see the runners the whole time, you see them moving the whole time. And we have decided that it's worth live streaming, even if we don't have that quality of image. And that is a big difference, I think, both between like the European audience and expectations and the US audience and expectations, and what we've deemed valuable and worth it. But I think those are kind of the stark differences between those two entities. The only thing similar I would say that I've worked with, like going over to UTCT, for example, so another kind of like outside perspective as opposed to like a US based race, where they did have better kind of ability to have like bikes and runner cameras on the course. They bring a similar kind of production value. Like the back end of those events is pretty complex, because they do have more moving pieces on the ground. And it's like some of that does add quality. And sometimes it's like I look at what we've been able to do with a race like with an organization like Mountain Outpost, where I wouldn't consider it shoestring by any means, but the quality that you're producing out of a race like, let's say, Big Alta or Black Canyon, for example, I don't think it's that off what we're seeing at a UTCT or a UTMB, despite the fact that you've got a lot more pieces layered in. So I think that we're going to continue to see that improvements on like the North American streaming side. But but I think that we're doing a lot with limited data and with much smaller budgets.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Next question. So, races like Western States 100 and Broken Arrow have a ton of volunteers that can probably help with data collection and keep live streaming rolling without dead spaces. For mom and pop races where volunteers are generally far fewer, is live streaming a smaller event possible? And what do you need to make it work? And Tom, do you want to take that one first?
Yeah, I mean, yes, the volunteers are mostly people that jump in with a camera, just because we don't have service in the mountains. Without volunteers, we can't do as many cameras as we'd like. But I think the back of the house stuff, the production stuff, isn't really volunteer heavy. If that makes sense.
Okay, good, good. Thank you, Tom. Jeremy, do you want to go next on this one?
Yeah, so when there's anything this public facing, we generally don't rely on volunteers. We try to offer those folks some kind of contract, or they're people that are already our employees. So in terms of I don't know, relying on volunteers, we generally don't, unless it's either one of my personal friends who is more tech savvy than I am, or we rely on having folks that we contract with to perform the service that are just more technically savvy than we're able to be. A lot of folks will think of Daybreak Racing as one of the, I guess, bigger trail race series in the country, but we're literally 2.5 people, so we're not a huge team. So
Cool. Thank you. Corrine.
Yeah, and I would just add that there's probably a difference between the like volunteers from like a data collection standpoint, like a filling the space standpoint, versus a like producer, mixer, audio engineer, camera runners, drone operators, etc. A race like Western States, for example, and Broken Arrow, they're contracted with drone operators, generally speaking. Although we had some sick footage from Jamil last year, and it was like just Jamil out there with a drone. But a lot of our like our camera runners, for example, are volunteers, right? And there's actually at Western States, we've actually developed a volunteer coordinator role for the live stream specifically, just to coordinate the handoff of gimbals for phones, etc. That's been really crucial, so that people like Billy Yang, who's in charge kind of keeping that production running, isn't tasked also with volunteer management at a race like that where we are streaming for 30 hours. It takes an army of people that are willing to run back and forth from Robie Point or bike back and forth with a camera to bring people to the track, for example. But everyone that's handling a bigger camera, who's dealing with sound or production itself, are generally contractors that are paid by the organization to bring the production to life. Akin to like now bringing on Mountain Outpost as our partner for that for Western States. But from a filling the air standpoint, like how do Dylan and I talk for 30 hours? Well, we only have to talk for like 21 hours, I think, 20 hours generally speaking, but it falls generally on the commentary team to make sure that we have that information. And I know that both Corinne Shalvoy and Katie Asmith are on this, and they've done this at Black Canyon, for example, where the commentary team and the race organization itself kind of like partnered together to send out Google Sheets and Google surveys to say, hey, can you send us a photo of what you're racing in? And also like, tell us where you live and a little bit about you. That's happening at Western States as well, with a more formal like Google survey that's going out, like speared on by Billy Yang, but also Callie Vincent and Scott Trayer have done that for the overnight coverage or the back of the pack coverage, so that they can share those stories. But we get lucky that we have friends out in the field that might have a bar or cell service and can, Kim Gaylord can text us from Michigan Bluff to say that Katie Scheid looked a certain way, type of thing. And it's just like our friends happen to be out there. But we're also looking at ways, I'm on the board of the PTRA. Katie Asmuth is on the call as part of the women's working group there. And we're actually looking at ways in part to improve the women's coverage at particularly at really large races like the Western states, like UTMB, where women's coverage falls to the wayside. And so we're looking at more formal ways that ITRA, that the PTRA, that UTMB, that any big organization can put together a standard form that we ask the pro field for the really big races, the entire field for the larger community races, so that we do have accurate information, which removes speculation from the commentary booth, because it's not just about filling air, it's about talking about the people that are actually in the event, what we're seeing, historical context to the times they're running, etc. And that information's all available to us. Sometimes it means looking it up on the fly. Sometimes it means procuring it ahead of time, but there isn't like a big group of volunteers that do that. It is like, unless commentators do fall into the volunteer bucket a lot as well, that it's us trying to set aside that information so that we have it and can readily pull it up during the race, so that we remove speculation, that we remove guesswork or saying inaccurate things on air, because inaccurate things on air become truths, and like for an athlete that might not actually be their truth. So we've got to be really cognizant that we're actually saying things that we know to be accurate.
Great, thank you, Corrine. Yeah, I mean that's a really good point, isn't it? The responsibility then of what you're sharing, it needs to be accurate. You know, you can't second guess and think, is this right or is this not right? So thank you so much. We got a question from Jody McNeil, and Jody, thank you so much for being out there. They're saying, interested in hearing how a small race could get started in live streaming. For example, setting up a camera, finish line, athlete interviews, etc. Tom, do you have an answer for that for Jody?
Yeah. Yeah. I think the easiest way to do it is how we do it currently with Yardstream. You're able to set up 10 cameras. It's a great software that holds 10 cameras. Every person can share one screen, so you can have up to 20 screens. You do need to have somebody directing it where they can drag and drop the cameras. So if you're talking about a certain vantage point, if you want the finish line and you want a question and answer, you need to be like, okay, we have so and so with so and so, and you click and drag and drop that. So that's what the viewer sees. That would be the easiest way, the cheapest way, and that person can just be using their camera phone as long as they have the link sent out to them. Previously, they could be at the finish line, doing interviews, or you can have that at an aid station. You can have somebody with just search, following bib numbers, calling them out, whatever you'd like to do. But Yardstream, I think, is the number one easiest way, cheapest way for a small race to start dabbling in this and to see how it goes.
Cool. Excuse me. Thank you, Tom. Jeremy, do you have anything more to add to that? And I guess the maybe one question I have kind of following on from this is because you outsourced the live streaming, then how did that work out? And you mentioned that Dylan helped you in terms of sponsorship and that kind of thing. But I guess it depends on the size of the race and how much sponsorship and cost there is.
Yeah, I mean, so we have two events that we uniquely partner with Freetrail on, and that the live stream and kind of that public facing promotion component is fully on them. So I'm able to take a giant leap back from that and focus specifically on the event the actual physical logistics on on the ground. But we have obviously several other events, and they all kind of have their own unique opportunities and challenges. It's especially since 2022, we invested in initially just one Starlink unit, and then now we have a handful of them. And we're able to use those basically as connections, to the internet at all of our aid stations at most of our events. So um, essentially, we've never really stepped beyond using social media as our kind of source of broadcasting, outside of hiring a contractor to do it for us. So a lot of it has come basically through our Instagram channel or Instagram feed, which it still works. But in terms of looking beyond that and uh, filling the gap with short of having a full production like Mountain Outpost can provide, we're still a ways away from that, and it sounds like Tom is probably ahead of us in that regard in terms of using I think is it StreamYard you said?
Yeah, so I have a question in the sense of, I guess, just to all of us. So being proactive and going forward. So if you're putting things on Instagram, you're putting them on Facebook, you're putting them on YouTube, you're kind of spreading the way to quantify the viewers, right? So you have 1,000 on Instagram, you have 5,000 on Facebook, but you have 15,000 on YouTube. If you have it only in one channel, do you think that that's going to be the best way for us as a whole of streaming racing, where now we can go to sponsors and we say, listen, Terry brought it up earlier, hey, they had 115,000 or 150,000 viewers. Is that a better way to quantify it in one spot than in three different platforms? So I think that with using StreamYard, that's easier to do because it goes right to your YouTube channel versus an Instagram handle. I think that's the only I guess the question of where do you do it and how do you post it?
Yeah, I do know that like for Freetrail, for example, like we're selling everything we have. We're selling the newsletter, we're selling the podcast, we're selling the personalities associated with them, etc. Like having our recurring newsletter, it's like every single piece of the puzzle adds up to increased value. So you're right, like building that YouTube following, I think YouTube's the biggest search engine in the world. It's probably the most stable of all the platforms. Regulations aside, we've seen the rise and fall of Twitter essentially. We've seen Threads not really take off. We are, looking at a TikTok ban, Instagram, it's like, where does that fall in the mix? Facebook it's like you've got different demographics on each app, et cetera, where YouTube seems to be kind of this really stable platform of the mix. So building subscribers in that realm, I think, is incredibly important. And then you do add on things like, and then we have, we gained 1 million impressions on this post on Instagram and we did blah, blah, blah. So I think it's like YouTube becomes that kind of like key piece of the puzzle ultimately, but utilizing just really, really good Instagram content, for example, of like some in race. I mean, I go to Instagram to find race updates all the time if there isn't like an official broadcast, for example. And it's like, I want to see that podium picture as soon as it happens type of thing so that I know how, the 50K played out up at Hood or something. And I think that, investing in Starlinks go beyond just getting out to YouTube. It can help you get stuff from the field up onto Instagram. It replaces maybe our ham radio operators at certain races where, from like a safety and security standpoint, all of a sudden, if you can get that information out over Starlink in an area that doesn't have otherwise great service, you can probably find a number of boxes that investing in something like that checks for you. We performed a search and rescue during UTCT for a medical emergency based on the YouTube comments on our live stream 2 years ago. There was a runner down, having issues. The runner that found him couldn't get an emergency call out, but could get onto YouTube and pinged us in the chat. I was able to go out and talk to one of our media team who happened to be like an ambulance operator. He called his buddies in the field who were the EMTs on course, and they were able to intercept this runner between these two aid stations out on the 100-mile course. So it's like, you never know what it's good for, but we were able to effectively locate a runner down with chest pain in between two remote aid stations because another runner could get onto the YouTube chat, which is insane and probably shouldn't be what it's used for. But I think that there's a number of avenues that all these things end up kind of coalescing and filling the need for your social media, your live coverage, your an additional safety and security net, et cetera, et cetera.
Wow, what a story. Unexpected benefits from you didn't see that one coming.
Yeah.
Katie Azimuth had a question here. Katie as well, thank you for being out there too. She says she's been on live streams where there was zero information given to commentators, which is a deterrent to getting more people behind the mic. The research takes a lot of work. The survey Corrine speaks of is standard across live streams, in my opinion. We are pushing to eventually have a database for elite athletes to update with information such as sponsors, nationality, residency, ultra sign up, Strava, social media links, and basic questions. This information, as well as historic splits, need to be readily available to commentators. It needs to be easier to standardize the quality of information spread during the live stream. So Katie's saying, thoughts on this? So initially, that sounds like a really good idea. That I think that would certainly be really helpful. But is that realistic? Is that something we can look to for the future?
I think it allows anyone to step into the booth and be a commentator. On the other hand, I'm like, well, it's job security for me if I'm the one willing to do the research. But no, I do think it's a bit of both, right? It's like it's like creating a base standard that's available to everyone that the race organization can put on, or and a kind of like third party like ITRA, et cetera, could be the hub for such database where it's not in one series. It's kind of like spans all the series for the most part that are available, including races from WMRA to, you know, vertical only to mountain running, World Cup, sky running, et cetera. It's got, you know, kind of all under one umbrella versus like a UTMB index as a platform. That being said, I do think that it's an investment by the people that are coming in to work for the event, right? That you are putting in the time to kind of understand who's in the race, et cetera. So I think it's a bit of both. I think it's needing to create a standard way to share information, but also really understand if you're stepping up to get in the booth that you are willing to do your homework and to be a student of the sport, because you can read information off of a data sheet, but if you don't know that information coming in as well, like I think there's a difference in how that information gets readily told to an audience, I guess is what I'm saying, versus having to read off of a fact sheet. It's kind of like, I find that I remember things better when I write it down. So if I've done the work to write it down into a document like that, I'm way more likely to actually like keep that information in my head and be able to talk about it live. So I think it's probably a little bit of both, needing both things to actually happen.
I also think that we need to maybe clarify, like, it's a great question, Katie, but it's also like this live streaming is in such infancy. Like this is just in front of us. It's growing up right now. So like this stuff is going to come. It's just going to come with time. What's our priority list? You know, right now, I think, you know, service is number one. You know, let's get live streaming dialed in, and then then we can go down the line of checking off, okay, this needs to be done. We need to have something that has every athlete and all their stats. Like, well, what do we do as we grow? How do we prioritize what we need versus what's just a luxury of the sport? You know, I think that's, I'm sure somebody's going to come up with it. Maybe it's not us, but somebody's definitely going to come up with it, and it's going to change. It's going to change how we do live streaming.
It's another project for Travis at Freetrail Fantasy. He keeps adding new features that makes all of our lives easier. This came up, and I think that Katie mentioned, and Katie, I don't know if you heard earlier, but I mentioned that survey that we sent out at Black Canyon to the elites, and Callie Vincent and Scott Traer did the same thing for people who are going to be finishing overnight as well, just to have relevant information. Generally speaking, like the Western States website has actually Excel files of all of the historical splits. So like I utilize those during the race. I just make sure that I've got the most updated files downloaded and have the key information written off there. But part of this is coming from, just so everyone's aware, that the Canyons live broadcast, for example, this year was very male heavy. It was very male dominant. They weren't able to share the stories of the women racing. The storytelling in general was lacking on that front. We missed key things like Kareth Arnold, who ran her way to her golden ticket, was 7 months postpartum, or MK Sullivan was doing her longest ever race and ran beautifully to second place. Like we missed a lot of stories. Anna Cassius is like a Bay Area like local and an amazing 100K road runner, but hadn't really like linked it up on the trail. And all that was missed in part because there's probably like inherent bias on like an all male commentary team. And so it's like, if we provide that information, will they talk about it? That's still like you have to remind people to talk about it. But that's where a lot of this comes from too, is that we're like, well, if we provide the information on the field, does that mean that independent of who's in the booth, even if it's not a male female team, if it's just two guys, like, will we get better storytelling on the entire field versus the inclination where, these are my guy friends, I can talk about them type of thing. And so I think that like that is where a lot of that stems from. And I think that's very valid. And so Katie, Corrine and I cannot always, and Leah can't always be in the booth. And so we're on the field as commentators. And so making sure that anyone who walks into the booth can do justice to both races, to the entire field, does have a lot of importance. And I think that that's where it comes from like the pro elite front end of the race appeal. I actually think that we're doing a better job for the middle and back of the pack when broadcasts go long enough to cover them, with people like ADW and Callie and Scott, who have already started to make sure they're collecting stories to be able to share during that time period. So I think once again, it's like, it's on the volunteers, it's on the commentary staff, it's on a person within the race organization to maybe like coalesce around how that information is gathered.
Mm-hmm. Katie also mentions here about making a standard for media plans with clear guidelines for equal men's coverage as well. Which is it's kind of it seems absurd that we're still kind of talking about this kind of thing, but it should be it should be happening, not something that we need to talk about. Why isn't it happening?
Yeah, and Katie's cheating a little bit because we're part of the women's working group at the PTRA, and so these conversations are happening, but they should be happening really broadly, right? Like most media plans kind of include the women's race as an afterthought, and so we've been having conversations with race organizations like UTMB to try to push them to have a very clear plan for the men's race and a very clear plan for the women's race. And we're seeing that trickle down. Mountain Outpost has been doing an amazing job on that front, having worked on the backside of a lot of their events, including doubling down on their infield commentators, or how you move a camera through the field, right? If you're not going to have a camera that stays static at an aid station and you're planning to jump that camera across the field. And so this is valuable information for any size race, is allowing, making sure that you've got cameras allocated well, so that when you jump ahead to cover the front of the field, which is generally the men's race, that you're not missing the women's race because you had to move the camera. So that might mean doubling down in specific locations so that someone can stay there until the top 10 women have come through, if you're not leaving a static camera throughout the course of your race. And that makes a big difference. And we've seen it make a big difference. We've made mistakes. We learned really quickly at Bandera last year that if we only had one infield correspondent, it was Leah, she had to move too quickly. And occasionally it was like, if we move now, we're going to catch the men at the next spot, but we're going to miss, two women here, or if we don't move, we're going to catch these women and we're going to miss the men at the next spot. So it's like, they realized that they had to double down. And so Mountain Outpost now has doubled down on infield correspondents when we utilize them, to make sure that we don't have to make those decisions, that it's like very clear that this person can stay here and then they can leapfrog ahead from that location.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Katie, I love your comment here as well. Just trying to spread the gospel outside of the work groups, and that's really important, isn't it? Because it's obviously useful discussions are happening in the work groups, and that's where a lot of change takes place. But we also need to get the information out past the work groups too. So thank you, Katie. Corrine Chauvoy out there, have you two, Jeremy and Tom, Ever gotten pushback from athletes who say they would prefer not to have the race live streamed or feel it deters from the experience of the runner? So Jeremy, have you ever had that happen to you?
Not in that direct of an approach, in terms of phrasing the question. I think we've definitely had a handful of comments come in either via email or after the event, in response to our kind of post race email of folks just kind of spitballing ideas in terms of either how to make it better or some occasionally questioning uh, why are you prioritizing a live stream versus lowering your fee or emphasizing other aspects of the event, and of course we're going to justify the live stream, because we're ultimately our one of our primary goals is to elevate the sport, and that means trying to bring it to as many viewers as possible, and in a responsible way that we can build into our permits. So I ultimately, and again, the way that we've done live streams is it's been funded by sponsorship fees. It's not coming from registration fees at all. So that's generally how we've been able to respond to folks questioning like that.
Cool. Thanks, Jeremy. Tom, yeah, do you have anything to add on that one? Has that come your way?
No, but he said it perfect. Yeah, no, I've never had that question, but I think that this is the next step for our sport to grow. I think that this is it. I think that this is going to make this. It's not an easy spectator sport, and you see a lot of sports like rally car and stuff like that. Sports that aren't easy to spectate just kind of flounder, and I think that we're lucky enough to have this where we could really grow this and make this really special.
Cool. And I would note just from like being on the call when a runner has needed to like have a moment, either they need to go to the bathroom, we had a runner run into a ant hive at Doi Inthanon 2 years ago where this runner had to disrobe on the trail.
Wow.
Like the camera's never like, no, we got to film this. It's like, oh, okay, like we've watched runners like pull off to the side, etc. We watched the camera go down or like is removed. It's not live streaming you needing to go to the bathroom or needing to take care of an ant situation or whatever it might be. And so I do think that it's part of the puzzle. And at the most extreme ends, in my mind, I think that we have to figure out how we want to handle like camera runners, because we don't have that really in the US right now, but it is like it's way more distracting in Europe than it is in the US having camera runners. And like I want it to be standardized where it's like camera runners can or can't talk to you. They like have it be very standard as to what they're allowed to say to you, if they're allowed to give encouragement, etc. Because I think that is we don't have that problem in the US right now because we're not utilizing camera runners due to bandwidth and cell coverage. But in big European races, I do think that needs to be standardized, because if I was chasing in fourth and the gal in third is getting like splits to me and encouragement to me from the camera runner who has the commentators in their ear, it's not like a random fan on the course who's giving everyone a split. It's like they know the information. And so it's like I think that has to be standardized from like a keeping things fair standpoint. But I've seen cameras like take a moment away from a runner who's having a hard time. I've seen it happen to Jim at UTMB. We saw it during Cocodona where a runner asked for a moment, etc. So I think that cameras do a pretty good job of trying to be respectful of the athlete just needing to exhale even, which is important.
Very important. Okay, we're getting near to the end of our time, and I want to squeeze one more question in. In terms of we talked about the growth of live streaming in some significant races. How do you three see future growth in this area? And what are the untapped potential areas for grassroots races that you think are waiting out there? Jump in at once. Go on. No.
I mean, the untapped is sky's the limit. I can't imagine where this is going to be when we look back in 10 years. I mean, I'm wondering where sponsors are going to go. If we're starting to run ads during our live streams, do they not show up for the race? You have a Solomon tent. They bring demos. It's nice. It's a nice feature of the race. But now they're not putting boots on the ground. Now they're investing $10,000 into the live stream. Where does that go? I think that, yeah, I think it's sky's the limit. I think when we start getting the footage dialed in, so before she was talking about, you need to know certain things. Do we take out your commentary and put in basically the heartstring story of them talking? Hey, I had XYZ, this happened to me, I did this, and you just plug and play those little 30-second clips. I think that that's going to start getting people to like or hate certain runners a little bit more. So you'll have the villain, you'll have the superhero. I think that, yeah, I think this is going to be sky's the limit on these. I mean, you start turning this into a little bit of a documentary at the same time as a live stream, and I think it's going to kill it.
Yeah, I would just add that I think like there's a ton of growth opportunities from small races to very large races, from covering, the golden hour, the back of the field, to covering the pros. We could have an hour-long discussion just on that. Been on both sides of that for sure. And then I think that like, yeah, it's also what you do with post-production after an event too, I think adds a lot of value to your race and to your event as well. So maybe your live stream is really limited right now, but you could put together a really cool 15-minute post-production cut from the race weekend that has higher quality imagery that you could voice over in sections, etc. I think that helps build brand awareness that a lot of races aren't necessarily utilizing well right now. We've seen Golden Trail Series utilize that at events where they can't live stream effectively, like Pikes Peak, for example. They fall back on post-production, and I think that post-production holds an untold amount of value.
Jeremy, anything to add on that one?
Just to back up what Corrine just mentioned, particularly at our two races where we partner with Freetrail. I mean, we have the the full live stream production happening throughout each event day, and then for instance, just as an example, one of Freetrail's core members, Ryan Thrower, who is an incredible photographer, videographer in his own right. He's not necessarily actively participating in the live stream, but he's out there on course. He's gathering footage all day long from bib pickup until the very end of the day, and he's there under our timing tent at the finish line on his computer editing, and he's putting together like the end of the day just kind of highlight reel, and we'll get that out, and it probably will blow up with more social media responses than anything else. So there's a ton of value in that post-production in terms of grabbing new attention, but also just maintaining focus on your event and celebrating it.
Cool. Corrine, for those people out there that they're hearing, obviously Freetrail, you're doing an amazing service for races already. So if people want to reach out to you and want to have a conversation about getting on board with you in terms of live streaming for their races, is it okay if I share your contact information? And we'll put it on the recording that I do as well. So, but is that okay with you?
Yeah, you can reach out to me at Corrine at freetrail.com, and also hello@freetrail.com, I believe is our generic one too as well, and that comes into the team. So Harmony or myself, etc., can get back to you. But yeah, we're excited to see kind of media broadly grow in the sport.
Cool. Good. And Tom and Jeremy, if people want to connect with you, is it okay for me to share your emails too?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, of course.
Brilliant. Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much, all three of you. That was we had a lot of unanswered questions that we didn't get time to get to, but we did cover a lot of ground here. So so really appreciate you. I mean, we're just scratching the surface here. I and Tom, I think you described it. It's like, you know, we're watching infants here. It's very yeah. Part two, Jody. I think part two would be a good idea. Well, actually, we are going to have part two at the US Trail Running Conference in October in Knoxville, in Tennessee. So we'll be sharing more information about that. About that in due course as well. But yeah, thank you so much to our panelists, Tom and Corrine and Jeremy. Really appreciate you having making the time to sit here and be with us. And Corrine, you did. I didn't hear any digging or noise outside, so you did well.
Yeah, it's risky business, but I think that we threaded all the jackhammering perfectly.
Dear. Well, I was also a little concerned because I've got heating engineers here at the moment, and I actually had to close the windows before I started this because there was noise from outside. So, so I'm glad everything on the technology side worked without interruptions. So, thank you everybody outside as well for being on here, and yeah, we look forward to seeing you again. Our next masterclass is in June. I forget the date. I haven't got it right in front of me right now, but we'll send you information on that, and that's about course marking. And we're also going to be looking at some technology advances in terms of course marking as well. So we'll look forward to that one. So I'm going to stop the recording.